Hey, good evening, everybody. Hey, welcome to Faith and Finance Tuesday, a segment of the core where we're built from the inside out. I'm your host, Pastor Marvin Adair, and I want to thank each and every one of you for taking time out of your evening to join me tonight. Hey, listen, whether you're watching live or catching up, you'll catch up on a replay later. I truly believe tonight's conversation has the potential to change not only the way you think about money, but the way you think about yourself. And if you're watching live, go ahead, let me know where you're watching from. You know, from the STL, we got anybody watching from different places? Just jot it in there. And if this is your first time joining us, welcome to the Faith and Finance family tonight, where we do this every Tuesday night. And also, if this teaching has been a blessing to you, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button and turn on your notification bell so you will know every time we get ready to go live here on Faith and Finance Tuesday. And our mission is simple: biblical wisdom, practical finances, right? And every week we're going to go over some timeless biblical principles and apply them to real life situations so that we can become better stewards of everything God has entrusted us with. Amen. So tonight we're going to be talking about a subject that I honestly believe is one of the most overlooked principles in financial success. And our lesson tonight, I'm just trying to change some things here, guys. Our lesson tonight is entitled Personal Growth, the Foundation of Financial Success. Personal growth, the foundation of financial success, right? And so before we get started, I want to ask you guys a question. And if you want to answer it in the chat, feel free to. But I want to ask everybody, just kind of, if you want to. But here's the question. If I gave you $1 million today, would you still be financially successful 10 years from now? So if you think yes, type yes, and if you think no, just go ahead and type no. Either way, I just want to see what we think. I'll give you just a second to do that. And the question was, if I gave you $1 million today, would you be financially successful or secure in the next 10 years? All right, we got a yes. All right, so we got a couple of yeses that came in. Anybody think not? Well, you know what? I thought that the question was an interesting question, because most people think money is the answer to financial success. I mean, that's me, right? I thought the same thing. If I just had more money, if I just got a better job, or if I could just hit that lottery, or, if somebody would just bless me with $1 million. Anybody ever said those things to yourself? And then you just think, if I can just get $1 million, or like I said, a better job, then all my financial problems would disappear. But listen to this. History teaches us something completely different, right? Throughout history, we've watched professional athletes, movie stars. We've watched recording artists, rappers and R&B artists, and we've seen the business owners. People who earned millions of dollars. And in the next 10, 15, 20 years, they have lost everything, right? And actually, there's research out there that talks about former NFL players. They said, for example, they found that roughly 1 out of every 6 filed for bankruptcy within 12 years of retirement. Now, that's something. These are millionaires we're talking about, right? Even though they earned $1 million during their career. Researchers also found that earning more money didn't necessarily protect them from financial trouble. Now think about that for a minute. They didn't have an income problem, What they had was a stewardship problem. See, money didn't change their outcome because money by itself does not create financial success. So tonight, what I want to do, I want to challenge you. I want to challenge a myth. The myth is more money automatically equals more success. Now, and I don't believe that's true at all, especially from the things I've been learning lately. I believe that personal growth comes before financial growth. Let me say that again. Personal growth comes before financial growth. Because before your bank account grows, guess who have to grow? You have to grow. Before investment starts to grow, I believe that you have to grow. And that's true for your business, whatever thing you're doing. Before you can start influencing people, you have to grow. And so this is what I've just learned. And for thousands of years, we read the Bible, and the Bible has been teaching that what many of some of today's greatest financial teachers are just emphasizing on, right? People like a guy named Jim Rohn. I don't know if you guys heard of him, but I know we all heard of Warren Buffett. Have you ever heard of Zig Ziglar or Brian Tracy? See, they all teach in one form or another that success begins with the person. Success begins with you, right? I like what somebody wrote here, and it said, your mind is your mind. And when I began studying what they were saying, I began to realize that God has been saying this all along. We can go in the Bible and you can see it all along. God's been saying it. So let's begin with what I believe is the starting point. So if you're taking notes tonight, write this down. Point 1. Your thinking determines your direction. Your thinking determines your direction. So before your finances change, what has to change? Your thinking has to change, right? Let me say that again. Before your finances change, your thinking has to change. And one of the greatest lies we as believers, I believe, is that if we say to ourselves that if God just gave us more money, then everything will be better. But the truth is, if your thinking doesn't change, more money simply magnifies our current habits. If I don't know how to manage $1,000, then guess what? I'm most definitely not going to know how to manage $1 million. If I'm impulsing with impulse buying with $100, then I'm probably going to impulse buy with $100,000. Why? Because money doesn't change your character, right? It doesn't change who you are on the inside. It just reveals your character. And that's why God doesn't begin by changing our bank account. What do God begin with? He said he wanted to change our hearts. And he said, let's begin by changing your mind. Now, what did Paul write in Romans 12:2? He says, and be not conformed to this world, but be ye formed how? By the renewing of your mind, that ye may prove what is good and acceptable in the perfect will of God. So notice something. Transformation don't begin in your wallet. It doesn't begin in your checking account. It doesn't begin with your retirement plan. Transformation begins where at? In your mind. Because your mind determines your decisions. And your decisions, it begins to determine your habits. And your habits begin to determine your future, right? So that's why Proverbs says. Also in Proverbs 23:7. For as he thinketh where? In his heart, so is he. Your thinking determines your direction. And that's why I spend so much time learning. And that's what I've been doing a lot lately. I've just been reading, I've been learning, I've been listening. I've been reading books, I've been listening to podcasts, I've been studying successful people, I've been learning about investing, I've been learning about financial planning. I'm learning more about businesses. I'm learning not because I want to know everything, but one of the things that I'm doing, I'm getting myself out of my comfort zone. And if I want to be better, I know that I have to do better, right? And I'm not trying to know everything or just say I know everything, but because I'm trying to listen to this, I figured this out. Then I'm trying to become more valuable than I was yesterday. I want to be more valuable tomorrow than I am today. I want to be more useful tomorrow than I am today. Now, Jim Rohn made a statement that changed my thinking. I was listening to him one day, and he said this: your level of success will rarely exceed your level of personal development. I'm going to say it again. Your level of success will rarely exceed your level of personal development. So when I first heard that, I had to stop and think about it. Because what he's saying is, if I want another level, if I want to go to another level financially, I first have to become another person mentally. See, and we'll talk about it later, but there's a thing called the law of the lid. It's the capacity, how much I can only go as high as my thinking and my mind allows me to go. That's with every area of our lives, right? Now, Warren Buffett, I've been listening. I sit at home sometimes and I'm watching. I'm coming into a financial nerd, But Warren Buffett, he said something kind of similar to what John Rohn said. He said the best investment by far is in yourself. Now think about that for a minute. Warren Buffett, known as one of the stock kings, he didn't say that the best investment is in stocks. He didn't say that the best investment is in real estate, not in cryptocurrency, not in business. He said the greatest investment that you can make is in you, right? Because when you invest in yourself, you increase, guess what? Your value. And when you increase your value, you increase your opportunities. You increase your opportunities. One of the things, working with the company that I work with, we had the opportunity to receive our securities license, and I'm not talking about being a security guard, but like Series 6 financially. That's what they call them, securities license. And one of the things that I started realizing that those licenses are basically not saying that you're going to get more money, but the more licenses that you get and the more credentials that I get behind my name, what is it doing? It's making me more valuable. And the more valuable you become, the more valuable I become, the more opportunities come my way. So you don't have to go look for opportunities, right? You don't have to go out there and look for opportunities, because when you make yourself more valuable, listen to what I'm saying, opportunities is going to come to you, right? So the question the question shouldn't be how much money do I want to make? I think the better question is, who do I need to become to handle the life I've been praying for? You ever thought about that? Instead of praying for the things or praying for more money, have you ever thought about, let me develop myself to become that person that I want to be, that can handle the wealth, that can handle the increase? Let me become that person, right? So point two, we want to talk about personal growth increases your value. Personal growth increases your value. So let's build on what we just talked about. So if your thinking determines your direction, then your personal growth determines your value. Now let me say that one more time, because I really want you to catch it. Your personal growth determines your value. One of the great years is this, that the marketplaces reward value. It doesn't reward excuses. It doesn't reward good intentions. It rewards value. One of my persons, like I said, Jim Rohn, he said something that completely changed the way I think about income. He said, we don't get paid for time. Listen to this. He said, we don't get paid for time. We get paid for the value we bring to the marketplace. We don't get paid for time. We get paid for the value we bring to the marketplace. Now stop and think about that. See, because most people say, I make $20 an hour. Now, Jim Rohn is saying, challenging that thinking, right? He said, if we're truly paid for our time, then we could stay home and our employer will still send you a paycheck. Why? Because you're getting paid for your time. But that's not how it works. That's not how it works. We're paid because during the hours we solve problems, we serve people, you go to work and you create value. See, we brought something to the marketplace that someone else was willing to pay for. Every time you go on your job, we're looking at how much do I get paid an hour, instead of saying how much value am I really bringing to the table. How much value am I bringing to the table? That's why some people can go out there and get, they can go out there and make 10x what you're making for the same job. For the same job, but they making 10x. Case in point, I cut hair for 30 years, and I remember there was a time and we was at the barbershop, and I said it was a great time. We was making a lot of money, but we was charging $10 a haircut. $10 a haircut when other barbers was out there getting 20. And by the time we got to $20 a haircut, the other barbers, I ain't saying all barbers, but there was other barbers out there that was cutting hair for $40. I even had a old classmate of mine that was charging $50 and $75 for a haircut, and he was getting it. What was the difference? It was the value that he saw in himself and the services that he brought to the people. And what I'm getting to realize that people will pay for your value. If you value yourself and you get knowledge and you value the skills, then people will pay for it. Now, those who don't pay for what you want, those are not the people that you're looking for. But the people will pay you even on your job. See, a lot of us, again, we're looking for hourly wages instead of saying, this is what I bring to the table. So here's the question I want to ask you tonight. Can you become twice as valuable as you are today? Can you become twice as valuable as you are today? Because I believe you can. Can you become 3 times more valuable? Absolutely. 5 times, 10 times. And the answer would constantly be yes. And if you become more valuable, don't you think your opportunities will begin to increase? See, that's why personal growth is so important, because personal growth increases your value. Now, let me make this a little more practical. And I know some of y'all say, I thought we was talking about money. We are talking about money. We're talking about how to better your finances, right? And becoming better personally is going to increase you. So let me say something practical, because some people tonight are retired, right? Some are living off of, or some who will be watching later on, you're living off Social Security or some type of fixed income. Some of you may be even thinking, Pastor, my income is at a certain level. Well, let me encourage you tonight. You can your current income, right? It might be a fixed income, but your value doesn't have to be. You can still grow. You can still read. You can still learn. You can still develop new skills. You can still become more valuable than you were yesterday. And maybe you learn about investing. Maybe you learn how to start a small business. Maybe you learn a new trade, or maybe you begin teaching what you've already learned. See, because you can become a mentor to someone. See, maybe you can become an expert in the area you've always enjoyed. Because as your value increase, right, new opportunities begin to appear. New opportunities begin to come about. They start showing up. And that's why I think Warren Buffett made that statement: the best investment by far is in yourself. The best investment by far is in yourself. You know, I just want you to think about that. Because one of the greatest investors in our lifetime, or we can just say whoever ever lived, out of all the stocks, out of all the companies, out of all the investment, Warren Buffett told us the greatest investment that I can make, that you can make, you know, is in ourselves. Is in ourselves, right? Because nobody can take away what you learned. Nobody can take away your wisdom. See? Nobody can take away the character that you develop. They can't take away the discipline that you've gained or the skills that you learned. See, those are investments that continue paying dividends for the rest of your life. For the rest of your life. You know, I remember when I was working on the church and I was building the church, one of the pastors came up to me when I was started pastoring the church, and, you know, the church was still in my grandfather's name and all that at that time. And he said to me, he said, man, you putting in all this work. They can take this away from you anywhere, anytime they want to. And I told him, I said, well, it doesn't make a difference if they take it away from me because I'm working on my skill. I'm working on my skill so that I can become a better builder. And that means if they take it away, I can go somewhere else and build another one. You know, that's one thing hey, right now you can throw me in the woods. Just give me a saw and some hammers and a nail. I will make sure that me and my wife have some shelter. That's value that I brought to my life. And truly and honestly, if I wanted to, right now, I can go somewhere and make me some money because I added value with haircutting. You know, I can go make some money if I wanted to. It wasn't about let me get out here and make more money. It was about let me become more valuable so I can have more opportunities. I can have opportunities. If they start getting robots building everything, I still got another skill that I can fall back on. You know, if you know, people driving Ubers, if they start coming out with these autonomous cars and nobody else can drive Uber anymore, you still want to have more, you want to create yourself to be valuable, right? Now listen to what the Bible tells us in Proverbs 22, 20, and 29. And I want to read this out of the King James. And I really want you to hear what the Message Bible says, but just for the King James readers. It says, seest thou a man diligent in his business? He shall stand before kings. He shall not stand before mean men. Let me read it again. Proverbs 22:9, King James. Seest thou a man diligent in his business? He shall stand before kings. He shall not stand before mean men. Now, the Message Bible says it like this. It says, observe people who are good at their work. Skilled workers are always in demand and admired. They don't take a back seat to anyone. Listen to that. Skilled workers are in demand and they are admired. And guess what? You don't have to take a back seat to nobody. Because you have an opportunity where when you have more wisdom and you became valuable, you can create. That's why I love that translation. It says, observe people who are good at their work. So in other words, pay attention to excellence. See, pay attention to people who have developed their skills. Pay attention to people who are consistently learning. You remember I told you about one of my friends in barbers, he was charging $50 and $75 for haircuts and he was getting it. He developed a skill and he seen worth in what he was getting. You know, if I can be honest, that's one of the reasons why I left the barbershop. Because I felt that I wasn't getting paid my worth. You know, I couldn't be in the shop where I said I'm gonna charge $50, and the other barbers are charging $20. You know, it would have caused conflict. So instead of causing a conflict, I chose to leave because I actually felt what my value was. I couldn't be on that level anymore. And that's what happens, I think, when you start growing. You start seeing your worth. See, because people, people paying attention to you. You know, I'm giving out designs. I'm doing the blackout, and you know, I'm doing all the latest stuff that everybody was doing. But then you think you're gonna come down here to me in the city and give me $25, but yet you leave, and you go to another barber that's doing the exact same stuff and sit in his chair and he tell you $50 and you have no problem giving it to him. Why? Because that barber charged his worth. He charged his value. And people gave it to him. I know beauticians right now that are charging $200 for low haircuts, and the only thing they're doing is putting hair dye in there. And they're getting $150 and $200. Some of them are getting $300. Why? Because the person says, my skills, I have worked on my skills, and I feel that I'm good enough that people will pay me $300. And some people are doing it. Why? Because excellence leaves clues, right? Listen what else it says. It says skilled workers are always in demand. So let me stop right there, because that's a powerful statement. It doesn't say lucky people are in demand. It doesn't say that talented people are in demand. It doesn't say that people with the right last name are in demand. It doesn't even say that people with the most degrees are in demand. It says skilled workers are always in demand, right? So let's ask ourselves why. You know why? Because value creates demand. Value creates demand. And the more valuable you become, the more opportunities begin to open. The more knowledgeable you become, the more people begin to seek your advice, right? So some of us, like I said, you might be retired, but you got so much wisdom and knowledge. Guess what? You can start maybe counseling folks. There's always something that we can do. It doesn't matter what age we are. It doesn't matter what age we are. Guys, I was sitting there, I went out to my first networking event today. My very first networking event today. Never went to one. And when I got there were, a lot of information, and it was one of the greatest investments to myself that I've made so far, in what I'm doing. But there was a gentleman there that had to be, he wouldn't tell us how old he was, but I'm going to take a wild guess and say he was probably in his early 80s. Early 80s. But he was a wealth of knowledge and wisdom. The type of person that you can sit up under. He can actually charge people to mentor them. And I'm saying this because some of you on this on looking live right now, or some of you who gonna watch later on, you counted yourself out already because you're saying I'm too old. I'm too old. But you got to know that you are still in the game, long as God got you on this earth. And so what you want to really do is just become disciplined in what you're doing. Because the more disciplined you become, the more people trust you. the more you grow, the more your capacity increase. And so that's why I'm spending a lot of time reading books and listening to people like Jim Rohn and Warren Buffett and Bill Winston and T.D. Jakes and listening to what they're teaching to me at New York Life. Because I'm understanding that every book I read, so I understand every class I take and every podcast I'm listening to, every lesson I'm learning is increasing what? My value. And I believe every believer should have a commitment to lifelong learning, right? Because if we're going to honor God with our gifts, we are to continually to sharpen those gifts that God has given us. See, don't spend all of your life just chasing money. Spend your life becoming more valuable. Because when your value increase, guess what? I said it already, your opportunity increase. And when your opportunity increase, your income has the potential to increase. And that's why personal growth isn't optional. Personal growth is essential. It's essential. So before we move to our next point, let me ask you a question. Let me ask one more question here. And if you don't mind putting it in the chat, what have you done to this week, right, to increase your value? Just think about that for a minute. What have you done this week to increase your value? What book have you read, if you read a book, or what podcast have you listened to? Have you started learning a new skill? Right? Have you started learning something new? You know, if you don't mind, if you are, just put it in the chat. What new skills have you learned? What podcast? What value have you added to yourself? What value have you added to yourself? When you go, just go ahead and put it in the chat. Because I want you to remember that the marketplace rewards value, right? And personal growth is how we increase that value. So the more valuable you become. Now listen to this. This doesn't have anything, and I'm not going to, you might be like, well, you know what? I don't have a college education. I don't have degrees and stuff like that. You have the capability to learn. You have the capability to learn. And, oh yeah, that's a good one, brother. The Secrets of a Millionaire Mind. Now, what is Pastor AT doing? What is he doing? He's increasing his value. And this is the type of stuff that we have to do. We have to increase our value. So he's reading the book, The Secrets of the Millionaire Mindset, right? Since I've been working on selling on Amazon, it's a great experience listening to a lot of podcasts. What are you doing? Increasing your value, right? So you can begin and selling on Amazon is great, right? But you can listen to podcasts, and you can listen to podcasts how to make that experience even better, because you're forever learning. You know, my father used to tell me one thing that I never really understood until I got older. He used to say, son, don't, you know, you hear the saying that you learn by your mistakes. He used to tell me, son, you don't have to learn by other people's mistakes. I mean, by your mistakes. You learn by other people's mistakes. And what was my father telling me? He was telling me, pay attention, listen, learn, you know, learn. And that's what I started doing. So point 3, let's do point 3 in this, and if we don't get through all of it, we'll pick it up next week. Oh, you guys getting something? If you're getting something out of it, give me some thumbs up if you're getting something out of this. So transitioning to point 3. So we've learned that our thinking determines our direction, right? And personal growth increases our value. So I guess the next question I would ask you is, how much can you actually handle? Because it's one thing to receive more, it's another thing to have the capacity to manage more. The capacity. Remember I talked about the law of the lid. It's capacity. So let's talk about capacity for a second, right? Write this down. Your capacity determines your increase. Your capacity determines your increase. Now we discovered something. Point one, your thinking determines your direction. What was point two? Personal growth increases your value. So now point three is your capacity determines your increase. So let me explain what I mean. Have you ever tried to pour 5 gallons of water into 1 gallon bucket? I know that's might be a little bit too extreme, but have you ever tried to do that? It's just an example. It doesn't matter how much water you have, right? You got 5 gallons of water, but the bucket can only hold what it has to the capacity to receive. So the problem wasn't water. The problem is the size of the container. So can I suggest to you tonight? Sometimes the problem isn't that God doesn't want to bless you. Sometimes the problem is that we're asking God to pour 5 gallons into a 1 gallon container. Can I get an amen? And that's one thing that I've learned. We're asking God to bless us with much, but we haven't been good stewards over the little yet. You see? So we're asking God to pour 5 gallons of water into a container that can only hold 1 gallon because our capacity hasn't grown yet. See, one of the leadership principles that has impacted my life is called the law of that lid. The law of the lid. Simply put, your growth determines your lid. Your growth determines your lid. And see, when you start understanding that your lid determines your capacity, and your capacity determines how much responsibility you can handle. Now think about it. If you don't have the capacity to manage $1,000, what makes you think automatically managing $1 million? You can manage $1 million. If you don't have the discipline to save $100, what makes you think all of a sudden you're going to become disciplined with $100,000? See, because money doesn't create discipline. Discipline creates better money habits, and money doesn't create wisdom. Wisdom helps us do what? Manage money. Money is not what creates character. Character helps you keep what God has given you, what you built. And that's why God is so concerned about our growth. Because we can talk about money. We can talk, and I can give you all the keys on how to grow your money. We can, I can tell you what vehicles you need, where you need to put your money at. But it's not going to be, you're not going to be successful financially until what? Your capacity begins to grow. Your capacity begins to grow. And the only way your capacity begins to grow is that you got to start doing some personal self-development. Some personal development, learning more. Learning who you're trying to become. Learning it is what you want to do. Now, everybody may not want to be wealthy. That's fine and dandy. But still learn how to increase what you have. We know because the talent, you go back to the talents, the master gave some 2, 3, some 2, 1, 2, and 1, 1. He gave them what their capacity can handle. He gave them what they can handle. And the Bible tells us that the man with the 3 talents, he was able to manage their 3 talents. He just didn't go out there and waste it. What did he do? He increased it. He increased it. The one with the 2 talents, what did he do? He was able to handle two. God didn't. God, pay attention to that text. Because the master didn't go out there and give all three of them the same amount. He gave them according to what their capacity could handle. And the one with the one talent, do you think that master didn't know he was going to waste it? That he was going to do nothing with it? That's why he got one. And when he came back, what did his master, if you read that text, what did that master call him? You no good for nothing. You useless. The least thing you should have done was put my money in the bank so it could have got some type of increase. But you didn't do it. And it has to go back to development. It has to go back to what have you given yourself. You know, we can't blame nobody else for what we don't have. A lot of times we got to start looking at ourselves and say, what am I doing to better myself? See, because when we stand before God, what is God going to say? What did you do with what I entrusted you with? You're not going to be able to blame your mama, your daddy, your husband, your wife, your children, your neighbors, your boss. Because God is going to say, I put you in that position. What did you do with what I have given you, what I entrusted you with? Now listen to this. God is always preparing us before he promotes us. He's always, each and every last one of us, he prepares us before he promotes us. He who is faithful over what? A little shall become ruler over much. What is God doing? He's preparing you. He's teaching you how to handle, how to manage what you have. And the more discipline, the more you start learning, the more you start increasing. The more capacity you expand your container, the more God says, okay, I can pour a little bit more in there. I can pour a little bit more. And that's what Jesus meant when he said that. He is faithful over the least, is faithful also over much. And he that is unjust with the least is going to be unjust with the much. And notice what Jesus said. If I give you more, then you'll become faithful. That's not what he said. He didn't say that. He didn't say, I know you've been suffering with that little, so I'm gonna give you more so that you can become faithful. Nope. Jesus said, be faithful with what you have when. What you have what? Right now. Because faithfulness increases your capacity. Faithfulness increases your capacity. When you can manage what God has given you and given you that little that you have right now, you may desire to have a business, you may desire to be wealthy. If you don't have that right now, just keep doing what you're doing, because guess what? God is going to increase it. He's going to increase your capacity. So let me ask you a question. What if God is waiting, not on your paycheck, but on your next level of growth? What if God is just waiting on your next level of growth? What if the promotion you've been praying for is requiring you to have greater capacity? What if the business you've been praying for is requiring for you to become a better leader? See, what if the financial breakthrough you've been praying for is only requiring for you to become a better steward? Because sometimes we ask God, Lord, increase my income. I've done it many a times. I have said it many times, God, if you just give me more money, I can pay all my bills. I can get up out of debt. I can give more. I can help more people. I can do all that. And then sometimes the Lord will let those things come in my hands. And I believe when God was letting it come through my hand and it went right back out, God was only showing me that you wasn't ready. You didn't increase your capacity. Because if I increase my capacity, then I increase my income. If I increase my income without increasing my capacity, then guess what's going to happen? I'm going to end up losing both. You hear what I'm saying? I'm talking about us. If you increase your income without increasing your capacity, you're going to end up losing both. Remember, we go back to the athletes, to the movie stars, to the musical artists, to those great business owners that made millions of dollars. I remember a customer of mine came into the barbershop. He had a business. And he came in and he said, man, I made $1 million this year. I said, what? I said, bro, you got it in this year. He like, yeah, man, I made $1 million, but brother, I don't have a dime to show for it. And I know some of y'all probably like $1 million. How do you go through $1 million? Easy. He knew how to increase income, but he didn't increase the capacity to where he can have both. So let me make this practical. Think about your own life. When you first learned to drive, you probably weren't ready to drive an 18-wheeler truck. What you do, you started off with something small, and as your skill increased, your responsibility started increasing, right? Some of us, we was afraid to get in the car. We needed a small car because we couldn't park, and we wanted something small. But you kept driving, you kept learning. And now some of us can just jump on into an SUV, bigger truck, and we don't even worry about it because what we do, we increased our capacity. We learned. We kept practicing, and we got better and better. We increased our capacity. And so more you might have started off with a smaller car. But the more you increase your capacity, you can drive just about anything. And it's the same is true with finances. When you first open up a checking account, you got to learn how to balance that bad boy. Then maybe you learn how to budget. Then you learn how to save. Then you learn how to invest. And then maybe you learn about retirement planning. But every step requires growth. Every level requires greater capacity. And that's why I spend so much time investing, guess what? In myself. Because I understand it at the age of 56, every book I read, every seminar that I attend, every financial class I complete, every podcast that I listen to, every lesson I learn, guess what I'm doing? I'm raising my lid. I'm increasing my capacity. I'm preparing for myself for whatever God has next for me in my life. And I want to encourage somebody watching tonight, don't pray only for increase, pray for greater capacity. Because if God increases your capacity, you'll be able to handle the increase when it comes. And I believe that one of the greatest prayers we can pray, Lord, make me into the kind of person you can trust with more. Because here's what I've learned. God isn't just interested in giving us more. I think he's more interested in preparing us for more. Y'all hear us talk about the process a lot. Going through that process is preparing us for more. Preparing you for where God wants you to be. Preparing you for who God wants you to be. And I think God is more interested not just in giving us the blessing, but us going through the process to get to the blessing. See, because in that process, he's developing our character. He's developing more discipline in our lives. He's developing and giving us more wisdom. And he's teaching us and developing within us stewardship. Because God knows, then everything else has room to grow. So let me leave you with this thought. Your capacity becomes the ceiling of your future. So you want to write that down. Your capacity becomes the ceiling of your future. And if you stop growing, your capacity stop growing. And if your capacity stop growing, opportunities will eventually stop growing. But every time you invest in yourself, every time you learn something new, every time you develop a new skill, every single time you become more and more disciplined, you are raising the lid. You're making room for more. You're increasing your capacity. And that's why personal growth is so important. Not because it simply helps you make more money, but because it prepares you to faithfully manage what God has chose to place in your hands. That's what it does. So I think this is a good place to stop. I got a little bit more for us, but I think this is a good place to stop. Hey, if you got any questions, go ahead and type it in the comment section, and then we can answer some of these questions. And give you a few minutes to type it in. But we're going to talk about personal growth at least once or twice, because I think this is the real foundation. Because there's so many times we want to become something that we're not ready to become. We want to get ahead. We want to get ahead of the vision. When God gives us something, we want to jump to the finish line instead of developing ourselves to reach the finish line. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Hey, it's all glory to God. That's what we always say, glory to God. But I encourage you all to continue to come back. We'll be back here next Tuesday, every Tuesday, Faith and Finance Tuesday. And we just going to keep learning more and more. And we're going to get better. But like I said, guys, I think that this is the foundation. And I don't think that we should be talking about, I'm not going to fluff it up and say, okay, guys, this is how we're going to become rich. Yeah, this is how we become who we're supposed to be, by first increasing who we are. Let me become better. I got a book here that I'm reading right now, and I'll show it to you. This book here is called Finish. Give Yourself the Gift of Done by John Acuff. It's don't stop midway. Just keep going. But it's showing systems and getting organized and disciplined, and because I have to become better. You have to become better in whatever you want. Whatever it is. And so, guys, we're gonna stop right there. That's all. That I got more again, but let's stop right there. And until next time, I will see you guys here on Faith and Finance Tuesday next Tuesday. Good night, y'all.